We're talking about the death this morning of actor-comedian Robin Williams. The sheriff suspects suicide by asphyxiation. And Vanessa, I've not heard from you yet. You've been listening to what we've been saying here. We've been trying to help people understand how depression, how addiction relates to that, and how depression can overwhelm somebody who brings all of us so much joy.
Right. And I listened, and I'm still trying to work through. It's just a struggle for me to understand how someone who has sought treatment and, you know, came out of treatment, but then went back and, by all accounts from his publicist, you know, it was just a maintenance thing. But then you're saying that something like this type of suicide can come so suddenly, and it's still hard for me to understand. And his last tweet was to his daughter. And I know Leanne said that he loved his children dearly, and I'm not trying to say that he doesn't, but it's really hard for me to wrap my mind around how he still could take his life, knowing he leaves those children and the wife.
The tweet, what did it say? Do you know? I didn't see it.
It was her birthday. It was a happy birthday tweet. And 25 years old, but she'll always be my baby.
Judy, having dealt with so many people that struggle with these illnesses, that just breaks my heart even more. Because I know they don't want to leave their kids behind. I know that they have no intentions of hurting anybody else. It's just the magnitude of what happens to the brain when it is in this state. I appreciate, Vanessa, sort of challenging us to help people understand this, because it is tough for people to understand how it's possible.
That's right, Dr. Drew, and people don't understand that you can't just will yourself out of it. It's not like you can just have a snapshot of your family. That's right, and I think people think that there's something intentional about the fact that these people continue to suffer or have relapses either into their depression or their substance issues, and it's not always controllable like that. It is a brain disease, as you've educated us so many times, and with Robin Williams, he's had so many other complicating factors that have actually made all of these issues even worse.
What made them fatal? Let's remember. Sam, this is the part that kills me, is that we still are facing stigma. Vanessa brought up the fact that the representatives describe him going back into rehab. We don't even know what they mean when they say rehab. Might have been a psychiatric hospitalization to maintain his sobriety. Well, there's no such hospitalization. I'm sorry. There just isn't anything like that. It might have been depression that was threatening his recovery. I totally get that, and we should talk about it like we do any other medical condition. Leanne.
The other thing that I thought was very interesting that I wouldn't have thought of Robin Williams, he actually was very good friends with Lance Armstrong. And I remember Robin's like, oh, yeah, he was a bicyclist. And I said, oh, you just kind of ride around. And he actually did like long haul bike rides and tried to get in really good shape. So, you know, I know some of my friends that are recovering from addiction and things like that, and they would get on a physical fitness kick. And I don't know if that was one of the ways that he would try to keep his life, healthy. And
they can get a high from like a runner's high from the biking, and sometimes it's to manage depression. Sometimes people's depression management is about having structure in their life and taking stress off and listening to classical music and reprioritizing things. Vanessa?
As the family has stated, they do want to focus on his life, and they want everyone to remember, you know, how great he was, which will be easy for us. We all have that personal connection, but what can we do going forward? How can other people that have members in their family that are struggling, what are the warning signs? How can we stop this from happening to someone else?
Judy?
Well, Vanessa, great question. And I think isolation is one of the first warning signs. When you start seeing them backing away, when they stop making their commitments and keeping them. And the thing is, family members and friends get really frustrated, people who are depressed, because they start pushing people away. They start kind of acting like they don't want you around. And of course, most people then give up because they're like, hey, I don't want to be around somebody who doesn't want to be around me. But that is one of the first crucial signs that somebody is really depressed. And as much as it hurts you in the moment, you have to continue to reach out and get to the bottom of it. And that's your responsibility as a family member. It really does take a village to keep everybody mentally healthy.
Samantha, you have some tweets, yeah?
Yeah, I do, Dr. Drew. Our viewers have a lot of questions. So from Pickard BJP, he tweets, how can we get the stigma gone from this serious disease?
His mouth to God's ears. Let's all work on it.
Right.
By talking about brain disorders the way we talk about organ disorders of any other organ. Robin Williams had cardiac disease and brain disease. The cardiac disease was serious. They treated it emergently, and guess what? It did not kill him. His brain disease killed him.
Wow.
That's a fact, and that needs to be on the tip of everyone's tongue. This man was robbed from us. His life was robbed. His family was robbed. And I say, not only is it mental illness that did that, it's the stigma of mental illness that really put that all the way in.
Yeah, and I have another question too, Dr. Drew, from Sharice256. Why do the ones that make us laugh so much hurt so deeply themselves? Hashtag Robin Williams.
That's an old...
it seems like all the entertainers that are really good have some sort of addiction or, you know, have some sort of problems in their lives. But, you know, Dr. Drew, I wanted to mention something. When you were talking about how people don't take depression and mental health seriously, it's almost like when I work with wounded warriors, right? You could be with a guy that had his legs blown off, right? And he's standing on prosthetic legs. And then you have a guy next to him that might have had something just as traumatic and have PTSD. And people will overlook that person and look at the guy and go, oh, wow, you're a wounded warrior. When the guy next to him that is whole as a body is just as wounded.
You know what? And I think it's a great way of thinking about it. And here's, let me help people make that leap. Vanessa, I'm going to challenge you to see if you can do it. What if they'd had a traumatic brain injury? What if somebody had whacked them in the head and they were injured and not right because of that? It's the same thing when the environment comes in on us and injures our brain.
I think I can really understand that, but if I'm looking at it from the opposite way and we're asking why can't people make that connection, it's because if you're wounded and you can see the physical wounds, that it does something different. I really believe people, if your legs aren't there or if you can see that scar on someone's chest, then you kind of get it. But a lot of times we talk about mental illness and how in these court cases we see all the time how someone's brain isn't working correctly and they go and kill someone else. So there's a whole different emotion attached to it. We don't feel as sorry. If I'm being very frank, we don't know. We don't feel as sorry for that person because they have in turn hurt someone else. When you have heart disease, you haven't hurt someone else.